Hi, I'm Allie with PotomacBeads.com, and today's Better Beader episode is going to show you how to add thread to your projects. It's a question that many of you have and that I'm delighted to answer for you. So for this Better Beader episode, since I went over the ending and starting of working with beading cable, I thought I would go over another area that people ask many questions and have trouble knowing the answer to. Sometimes there's multiple ways to do things, and this is one of those cases. I'm going to be going over how to add thread to a project that you're working on. In some cases, this may be required to put a clasp on the very end of the piece. In others, it may be required to continue on with a design. Sometimes you can add thread easily by knotting two pieces of thread together, and sometimes you need to weave it back into the project. When would you do which technique? This is hopefully going to tell you how. So there's multiple ways, again, how to add thread. When working with something that is very patterned or very tight knit, something using delicas or seed beads, if you're doing a flat peyote stitch, that's when normally people would suggest taking the thread and actually weaving it back down into the project, and then adding a completely new piece of thread and coming out of the project. This technique is often used because you do not want to see a knot anywhere along the project that you're working on. In this particular piece of a patterned peyote bracelet, you really would see a knot anywhere along this piece. Again, when you're working with delicas and doing a flat delica piece, or working with using a loom, you're going to see it even more. A lot of times, if you are running out of thread, and you have a piece like this where you really think that you are going to expose the knot and make it an obvious piece of the project, you don't want that to occur. So what many people will do is weave the thread back into the project. So I have my thread here and I'm continuing with my peyote stitch. And instead of going forward, I'm going to start to go back. This will double the thread in some areas. And I tend to go back on a diagonal to weave the thread into the project. So I'm just gently going back through the project, and I'm going to weave back about 2 inches before I cut off or get rid of the thread. This is important to know if you're getting toward the end of the thread and you don't have much to work with, because you want to make sure that you have enough to weave back. If you happen to have a piece where it's really hard to weave back, you may find it easier to actually knot off the thread. One thing that I'm working with right now is I have a large eye needle. The large eye needle is good for just kind of ending the last piece of thread because the thread can move along the needle itself. Keep in mind that as you go back in the project, sometimes when you pull, it can create a little tension or a little bit of a V in the project. If you want to check out the cool effect of that, you can check out the American flag, the wavy American flag bracelet, and that'll show you kind of how that pulling can happen. But I like to go the whole way down one of the sides if I'm working with a peyote piece, and then start to go in the opposite direction to really kind of hold that thread in place. The chances are that this thread will never kind of come to see the light of day. If you want to, you can still do what's called a sewer's knot or a half hitch knot. Taking your thread and needle underneath the bridge thread or the thread connecting 2 beads together. What that's going to do is make a little loop here. I'm going to sew my needle into that loop once, into that loop twice as it's smaller, and give a nice tight pull. After that, that's really securing that back knot. Even if you sew back to the project, you don't need to. Some people will use glue. A lot of times those that like to sew back in the project will not use glue at all. Once you have your thread woven, again, about 1.5 inches to 2 inches back in the project, you're going to take your thread burner or your thread zap or your super sharp scissors and get rid of that extra thread. When using the thread burner, I keep here more of like 1/8 of an inch, a little bit more than that. And then you're going to burn that thread end flush against the project till it disappears right along the edge and you barely see it working in your peyote. Now, how to add more thread to this piece now that you've basically gotten rid of thread at one end and you no longer have any to add. Take your new piece of needle and thread your needle, and you're going to start out somewhere away from that thread-ended knot, and I'm going to start further down before it. Going in here, and I'll just start right along the side. Usually I'll start in the middle and do the opposite. So we're going the opposite way now, and we're adding in the thread on that diagonal stitch. And what I like to do is actually, as I add the next piece of thread, you can see I started going forward and then I went back one stitch right along the project. Want to make sure not to bring the thread out near the other piece of thread end. And when you use the thread burner, it also makes a little stop on the thread because it burns the thread end and balls it up. And now what I'm going to do is literally just continue. And obviously I have a short piece of thread so that way you can see it being sewn into the project and you're not waiting forever for me to pull thread. But generally speaking, I like to work with about 5 feet of beading thread at a time. So I'd have 5 feet of thread that I'm pulling through here when I... So I'm not going to make you watch me go the whole way till the end, but you're going to stitch the whole way on that diagonal until the end of your peyote piece. And then you'll just continue on with your needle as normal. Like I said, usually you're doing this when you have a tight peyote stitch or a tight stitch that does not allow you to place a knot along it without it being very obvious or scratch against the body or so on. Again, about 5 feet of beading thread is what I would recommend starting out with, and that way hopefully for a lot of things you won't have to add thread. The other way to add thread is to actually knot the thread together. A lot of times in a tubular project, such as this one right here, you can actually, when you add thread, tuck the knot into the actual tube itself. You can see there's a tiny knot inside of there, and what I did was take the actual thread and the knot that is in the thread and pulled one end of it back into the project. This is going to allow you anything tubular to hide the knot inside the project, especially things that you don't want to see the knot exposed. Also, a lot of times with the different thread colors that you may be using, you can hide the knot pretty easily. As in this tubular peyote candy cane stitch bracelet here, you're able to hide the knot really easily, even if it's on the outside of the project, because of the white beads and the white thread. Sometimes when you're working with larger beads, you have the opportunity to actually add thread right next to the piece, and you very rarely see it. When you have larger beads, you're not going to notice a small tiny knot as much, especially in certain stitches. This here is a netted stitch, and you can see one place that I've already added thread. Again, this is a tubular form, so I could have taken that one piece and put it in. This is also showing you about how much thread I'll use and leave after I'm done doing the knotting and burning down the piece until I'm finished with the end of the thread. What I'm going to show you is what happens when you get to the end of the thread and you need to attach a new piece of thread to the project. I have the white piece of thread here at the end of this netting, and it's coming out next to one of the larger beads. This is going to give me an opportunity to hide the knot really, really easily because my seed beads in the netted round here are going to go basically over top of the knot and I won't see it. I'll be showing you how to do the knot with a green thread here. That way you can see the green thread as opposed to the white thread. What you're going to do to add thread is take the new piece of thread, the green one in my hand here, and I'm going to tie a knot around the white piece of thread. So you can see the knot here is just going to be with the green piece, and it's going around the white piece. What this allows that knot to do is move up and down along that white thread, and that green thread will move freely. Tying and pulling that knot really tightly, I'm going to shift that knot as close as I can down to the last bead. Taking the two thread ends then, both the white and the green this time, I'm going to tie a square knot right over left, nice and tight, and then I'm going to switch which hands my thread is held by, and then tie left over right and right over left. Once I have that nice knot there, I'll take my thread burner or my thread zap, go in here and burn down and leave my thread that it has about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. After I proceed with the project and I'm finished completely finished, some people will take a dab of super glue glue and actually drop it onto the knot itself. Others will take this opportunity, if they haven't already, to kind of tuck that knot inside of the tube. And still others will take the opportunity to have something like that burnt kind of knot end and take those two thread ends, burn them down closer with a thread burner. Then taking your thread burner, go flush against those little thread ends right towards the middle of the bead. When you do this on both sides of the thread ends, it balls up the thread and actually makes a stop of sorts in the actual piece. And that way you have those two pieces of kind of balled up thread ends that don't want to pull out of a knot, and it makes it much more secure. I don't do that burning until I'm completely done with the project. That way if I do want to glue, which you're going to wait till the very end of the project to do, I can do so and then burn down. With the burning down and the thread ends, if you do have the glue on, you'll see a little bit more smoke and see a little bit more of an actual, or smell a little bit more of an odor. Once you have the new thread on, then you're going to put your needle on the end. I actually do that beforehand, that way I'm ready to go. I'll put the needle on the new thread and continue on with the stitch. So whether or not you have a piece that allows for the thread to be added in the project while knotting the end, or if you have a piece that don't really want to use a knot because you're not going to be able to see, or you're going to be able to see it, you can weave back in. Neither option is right or wrong. Some people glue, some people don't glue their knots. It's really what your preference is. Which section stays better than the other? Honestly, the sew back method with this flat works really, really well because it gets trapped kind of between those peyote. But the tie method here is really, really easy as well. It's more about getting that knot tied correctly, making sure that you're doing that square knot, and then also, in my opinion, burning down those thread ends. As always with these Better Beader episodes, the idea is that it helps you to make more educated and better decisions, like how to add thread to your needle. In previous episodes, what type of clasp, what types of thread, what the different kind of coatings of beads are. So there's all different things that you can check out with these Better Beader episodes, which again are designed to make you better at your craft. As always with these Better Beader videos, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, give a little thumbs up, and you'll get regular updates next to that kind of subscription button there when we do new patterns, new designs, as well as these awesome Better Beader videos for you. If you would like to, in addition, you can actually follow us on our online page at PotomacBeads.com and PotomacBeads.eu. You can also shop with us there, and we're happy to send supplies to you for any lovely projects, thread, needles, whatever it may be that you want. In addition to that, join our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. Check out our Potomac Beads Facebook group, and also really enjoy and engage and become a member of that Facebook group as well. As always, thank you so much for watching this Better Beader episode on how to add your thread, and hopefully it taught you a thing or two about the different ways that you can add thread and the different situations in which one would be more beneficial than the other. Thanks for watching, and happy beading!